everybody, and thank you so much for joining us. My name is Scott Sinclair. I'm the Senior Manager of Programs here at Cancer and Careers, and I want to thank you all for joining us today. For those of you who are listening in from your phone, please let us know by sending an email to cancerandcareers@cew.org with your name and phone number that you're dialing in from. That way we can confirm your attendance and make sure you receive all of the relevant follow-up information. If anybody is new to Cancer and Careers, first of all, welcome. We're glad to have you. We are a national nonprofit and the only program of its kind solely dedicated to empowering and educating people with cancer thrive in their workplace. This is a list of all of our free programs and services that we offer. Our comprehensive website, available in both English and Spanish, is the heart of everything that we do. There you can find various support services, including our resume review service and access to career coaches. Our educational blog and newsfeed are both rich resources for those who have been diagnosed, their caregivers, employers, and healthcare professionals. All can stay current on topics related to work and cancer. Our free publication library is available in both English and Spanish, and they provide tangible, easy to digest information on working and looking for work after a cancer diagnosis. And those are available in both PDF and hard copy. We also offer numerous events every year, from hour-long webinars like this one right now to full-day events, and I will be back on after the presentation to tell you a little bit more about what we have coming up. Now, for those of you who are seeking continuing education credits, this slide lists all of the organizations we have accredited for today's webinar, as well as the required steps for getting a certificate. This information is also available on our website, and a link to the evaluation and post-test will be shared at the conclusion of the webinar today. So please take time to complete that. Or if you don't have time today, that's fine. You will receive an email tomorrow, Thursday, April 4th, no later than 5 p.m. Eastern. Also, for those of you who are planning to request continuing education credits, our accrediting bodies require us to share this slide and to let you know that there are no conflicts of interest to report. Now, as you may know, Zoom has a lot of great features which you can use to interact with the event today. In your features panel, you'll see a chat box. Feel free to use that chat box to communicate with our speaker, CAC staff, and other attendees. However, it's important to note that the chat box is not private, and it will show your first and last name. So that's something to be mindful of when and if you decide to engage in the chat. You'll also see a Q&A box in that features panel. If you have any questions about today's content, please submit them in the Q&A box, not the chat box. We might not see them all in the chat box. And we know the importance of privacy, so there is an option to submit your questions anonymously in the Q&A box. We'll do our best to answer everybody's questions today, but please be patient. And if we don't have time for yours today, send us an email at cancerandcareers@cew.org, and someone will get back to you with an answer. We want to thank in part Genentech and P&G Beauty. Cancer and Careers is proud to offer this 10th year of the Balancing Work and Cancer webinar series, which was created to provide anyone whose life has been touched by cancer with concise, targeted information about the work-related issues that arise after a diagnosis. Additionally, we'd like to recognize Cancer and Careers as year-round sponsors who support all of our core programs and allow us to continue providing our resources and services free of charge. Now, there are many components to looking for work. A resume remains an essential tool in the job search process, but more and more, a LinkedIn profile is just as critical. So whether you're changing careers, returning to work after some time off, or simply looking to highlight a specific skill set and experience, your resume and LinkedIn profile tell your story. To take us through this topic, I am thrilled to welcome back Julie Jansen. Julie is a speaker, trainer, coach, and author who has helped thousands of professionals find success and satisfaction at work, as well as find work that is gratifying. Julie is one of our original career coaches at CAC. Additionally, Julie is the coach who does all of our resume review services, which we hope you'll utilize after today's webinar. Once again, there will be time for questions after Julie's presentation, but for now, I will hand it over to Julie to get started.
Oops, here I come. Here I am. Hi, Scott. Thank
Hello.
you. So this is everybody's favorite topic, resumes. If I had a quarter for every time someone says to me, "Oh, I hate writing my resume. I haven't written my resume. I haven't updated it." And LinkedIn kind of is a close second to that. I would be a very wealthy woman and sitting on an island somewhere. But anyway, what I want to do today is just dig into the essential elements of both writing your resume and your LinkedIn profile. Managing the psychological aspects of a job search can be difficult, and often writing your resume is one of the biggest obstacles to getting started. So your resume should be updated regularly so that you're not faced with having a giant overhaul. However, most people either put it off, procrastinate, or just forget to do it. I want to give you just a little fun piece of history about resumes before I start talking about the practical elements. The origin of the resume actually began in feudal England as a letter of introduction from a lord or a head of a guild when a man, unfortunately a man, only traveled to another part of the kingdom. It evolved to becoming a curriculum vitae, or a CV, a term which means course of one's life, and finally began to be known as a resume, which is French for summary. Generally speaking, most Europeans still call the document a CV, but in the last few years have moved, many people at least have moved to American resume format. So let's move on. Let's go on. Okay, so how do you think about your resume? Like, what is it really? Most people would agree that it's a chronological history of your work experience, and that it is indeed. But more important, it needs to highlight your achievements so that a prospective employer will think that you can actually do the same things for them that you did for your current or previous employers. And it's really, really important to remember that it's not a regurgitation of everything you've ever done in your career. And then this is a really key point, this third bullet on the slides. There are 3 audiences for your resume. So when I, as a professional resume writer, write a resume, I have to think of these 3 audiences. First, ATS software. We'll kick into talking a little bit more about that in a few moments. But that's where you're screened, scanned, stored, and by software, not a person. The recruiter or the maybe an HR person who's now looking at the resumes that have been scanned. And then of course, there's the line manager, which is the person who actually gets what your job is. So it's really difficult to remember everything you've ever done in your career. I mean, I am constantly saying to my clients, please dump your resume into some sort of a Word document. And every time you accomplish something or you have a great performance review, just throw it. You don't have to wordsmith it, just put it on your resume, and then you can kind of clean it up and format it later. Unfortunately, most people don't tend to take the time to do that. So it becomes harder and harder to remember, especially achievements. So these are some ideas for you to write your resume, some tools that you can think about using so that you can remember those all important achievements. Job descriptions from your current and past job. Maybe your job isn't exactly as a job description describes, but it certainly will have some good content. Your past performance reviews are really awesome for identifying your goals and achievements. Going to online job postings for jobs that are similar to yours to pinpoint keywords and phrases, the keywords, of course, being relevant for ATS software. And then, as I mentioned, just kind of creating a master resume on your computer to use sort of as a brag file that you can cut and paste later. So, and with the basics of writing an effective resume, don't expect that anyone will read every single word with equal care. They're probably going to skim your resume and read it in maybe 30 seconds, maybe 60 seconds at most. Your goal is to help the person once they, once you've gone past the ATS, to help the person make the decision to either read it again or put it in the yes or maybe pile. And you want to be careful not to use too much content, long paragraphs, long sentences, or giant blocks of text. It's odd, and I'm not sure why this is, but resume is actually the only job search document. And when I'm talking about job search documents, I'm talking about cover letters, LinkedIn profile. Some people have board profiles. The only one that doesn't use personal pronouns, so first person tense. So you're going to talk about yourself as if it's not you when you're writing out your resume. You want to try to avoid the weaker verbs, but always start, if you can, always start every bullet point with a strong action verb. Usually a resume is 2 pages for the average person. I don't mean average as in a person, but just the average job. A senior exec can tend to have a 3-page resume, and often we'll see 3-page resumes for people in medicine, maybe healthcare, academia, science, research. Those kinds of professions tend to have longer resumes because they have a lot of publications or maybe posters or presentations. Leaving off earlier jobs is fine. People think that you might do that just because you're trying to hide your age if you're older, but the truth is you can do that at any point unless you're kind of under 10 years of experience, because you just can't put every single thing on your resume, and nor do you need to, and you don't do that on LinkedIn either. And then this is interesting. There are certain industries or jobs where there's kind of odd titles, like I'm writing a resume actually right now for someone who works for a government contractor, and she's kind of in a program project management role. And I mean, I'm reading her titles and they mean nothing to me. I've never seen them before. So what I do with her, what I'm doing with her is I actually put her title, and then in parentheses I put a title that is more comparable or more universally recognized by the rest of the world, so that people can understand what it is that she actually does. You always want to have some sort of profile or summary on the top of your resume. So, and not too long, usually it's 3 or 4 sentences, but that's where if someone's reading your resume, they're going to get most of the relevant information about you as a candidate and decide about whether they're going to consider you further. And they almost always will read that profile or summary after they look at your contact information on the top of the resume. And it's also a good place to add some of your personal traits that have made you successful and help you stand out. It's really the only place on a resume that there can be any kind of sort of personality, if you will. You definitely you'll hear me, if you've listened to any other webinars I've presented for Cancer and Careers, you hear me talk ad nauseum about keywords. Your resume must have keywords for ATS. ATS stands for Applicant Tracking System, that companies and job boards use to pick them up. And these should be limited primarily to technical terms rather than softer qualities. And again, we'll segue into a little bit more about ATS in a few moments. And at a maximum, 80% of your content should be achievement statements versus responsibilities. People will often make the mistake of just listing their tasks and responsibilities as if it's a job description. And yeah, you do need a little blurb on what that is. That's not what the potential employer is as interested in as they are in how you're going to make a difference and help them meet their goals. And when you are talking about your achievements or accomplishments, those are kind of interchangeable words on your resume. If you can find a way to actually apply some metrics to these achievements or accomplishments, that would be great. And an example would be the person who reduced turnover by 25% in 6 months. versus the one who merely reduced turnover. So, going on to, I think I just skipped one slide, so let me go back. So going on to more kind of the do's and don'ts of writing an effective resume, try to avoid, if you can, those sort of cliched phrases like effective communicator. Yes, you're expected to be an effective communicator, or detail oriented. That's kind of beyond. So maybe, you don't want to extend your vocabulary too much, but maybe just try to think of a little bit more creative ways to talk about, I like impactful better than the word effective, for example. Add a headline on the top of your resume that would go directly underneath your contact information. And that headline, similarly to your LinkedIn profile, would be, basically almost a job title or keywords that explain the different aspects. Like I did a resume for someone recently, wrote it, and it was program and project management, administrative support, and event planning, because she had done all three of those types of jobs throughout her career. So we opted to kind of put all of those up there in the headline. Always list your education and any certifications you may have after your work experience, unless you're entry level. And then, of course, your education is going to go first under your contact info. And then always add professional memberships. Even if a membership has expired, you can still put it on your resume and just put the end year. And then I get this question quite often when people have been out because of treatment, or they were laid off and they did some volunteering or some community work. There's some dual purposes to adding that to your resume at the end. One is that it shows that you giving to others. It also demonstrates that you're using specific skills, but try to avoid just listing the name of the organization. So I'm a volunteer for Cancer and Careers. I wouldn't just put volunteer. I would put, spearhead the resume review service, reviewing 282 resumes per year, that kind of a thing, rather than just saying that I'm a volunteer, because that's another opportunity for you to actually show that you can make a difference. Use plenty of white space. Resume, even though you don't know when someone will be reading your resume, you definitely still want it to be visually appealing. The fonts that I tend to like are Calibri, Cambria, Georgia, Helvetica, or Garamond, and there's a couple others that are good. I don't particularly care for Arial or Times New Roman. Full addresses aren't used on resumes anymore. It's kind of, it's kind of a trend, but it's also because of privacy and identity theft. Not that it wouldn't be very easy to find someone's address, but it's just the way resumes are written right now. And your contact information will just have your name, your cell, your email address, and your LinkedIn profile URL always goes up there, which is something that often I see when I review resumes, people forget to add. That's key as well. Don't mention references or list them. I'm surprised by how often people do this. I recommend, you're not going to really give anybody references until you're at that point where they're about to make an offer. And nowadays, it's surprising at how few organizations actually really do formal reference checking. So I had mentioned earlier that you want to start most of your bullets with action verbs. When you're writing accomplishments, this is a very small font, but it is a use. I actually refer to this list quite frequently, because you can unfortunately get caught in the trap of using the same action verbs over and over and over again. And you want to kind of mix it up a little bit if you're able to do that. So that's what I like this list for. All right, so let's talk like a little bit deeper about writing accomplishments, because it is literally the most difficult exercise for anybody. myself included, when I write, hundreds and hundreds of resumes, and sometimes I really struggle with, depending on the kind of information that's given to me or the data that I have, to write an accomplishment. I mean, you're not writing an accomplishment about solving world hunger. It doesn't have to be, people mistakenly think it has to be something really monumental. It doesn't. It just has to be something that where you change something, you improve something. Here there's some ideas. You got an award or special recognition for something. It was the first time your organization or your department or your functional area tried a specific type of approach. So there's so many different ways that you can identify accomplishments, and it seems a little crazy to say, but obviously your accomplishments have to do with what your potential employers are looking for. That has to be something that's very relevant. But this gives you some ideas of how you can start thinking about what your accomplishments have been. And then here's some more ideas. I like to put, especially when people have been promoted at one company 2 or 3 times, I like to talk about that progression in addition to just putting the different titles. Always, if you've ever, even if it's an intern, if you've supervised, managed, trained people, that's really important, because you don't really progress or get promoted without, in most organizations, without having to manage some employees. Saving money is a big one, especially for public companies, and then just identifying specific types of problems that people hadn't seen, and that you've since resolved. So now we'll just talk about the formula, as I'll call it, for writing accomplishments. So the first thing you want to think about, and those last couple slides sort of were trying to, kind of helping you think about what your accomplishments were. And when you're writing accomplishments on a resume, depending on how many years you've worked in a job, like let's say you've worked in a job for 6 years, you're not going to want more than 3 accomplishments. If you've worked in a job for 15 years, then you're going to want maybe 5, 6 accomplishments. So you kind of want to balance the number of accomplishments or achievements with the number of years that you've been in the job. So this is just one that I think I made this up. So as administrative support for 2 directors, and I won't read this whole thing, but this person was asked to manage a specific process for expense approval. So a pretty simple, straightforward process for 15 employees. So not a huge number of people, but what this person realized is that there were these forms that innumerable forms, 3 forms that needed to be filled out, and they were all on different systems, and it was really inconvenient. And as we know, most people don't like filling out expense reports anyway, let alone when it's an onerous process. So this person decided that they needed to really streamline the entire process. So they kind of, were always chasing after the employees, and they said they had to, kind of put an end to that problem. So what this individual did is just ended up consolidating all the forms and getting rid of the redundant fields, created one form, presented it to their managers. And then, this person had 2 managers. One was enthusiastic about the idea, the other one didn't really care. And so she had to do some persuading. And then you have to think about the results. What were the results? So in 8 months after implementation of the new form, all 100% of the employees were now submitting their expenses on time, which enabled this individual to focus on more important things. And the employees, of course, appreciated the easier process. They appreciated getting paid earlier, even though that's not in this, and they were no longer getting nagging emails from finance. So the bullet, and this might be a tad bit long, but the bullet that I devised for this particular achievement is, as you see it here on the slide, and for those of you who may not have the slide in front of you, redesign monthly expense submissions for 2 departments with 13 employees by streamlining the process into an online form. This resulted in improved employee productivity and accelerated the payment cycle from 90 plus days to 30. So that's the bullet that came from going through that process of, identifying the problem, what did you do about it, what were the metrics, etc. So now let's segue to the infamous ATS, applicant tracking systems. So ATS is software that's used to collect, scan, sort, and rank job applications. And that includes both resumes and cover letters. And companies actually, contrary to popular belief, companies actually knock out applicants. They don't identify the ones who are the best fit. So if you don't meet their resume filtering bots algorithms, you're knocked out. 95% of large companies use ATS, about 65% of medium-sized companies use ATS. I just sort of did some scanning online to do some research on stats, and these are pretty accurate. Smaller organizations don't tend to use ATS, but those are far and fewer between. And then, a lot, maybe privately held organizations might not use it as much either. But if you think about the average job posting, and let's just talk about more of a corporate job posting, actually receives somewhere up to 350 applications. And at the end of that process, the company usually screens in maybe 8 to 10 applicants. So that's considerable odds. Which is why you want to have the right keywords. So you're really focusing on optimizing your resume with keywords, hard and soft skills. So most job descriptions are the same formula. None of them are very creative. So you usually see who the company is and what the company does, what the job is, actually, what are the requirements, what are the nice to haves. And that's where you would take that job posting that you might apply to, and I'll just actually take a highlighter and highlight the keywords that are used consistently, and then I will filter those throughout someone's resume when I'm writing it. So not just on the top, although I'll say this a little bit later, there's always a bulleted keywords section, at least one of the formats that I use. So what you want to do is find 3 to 5 job descriptions for jobs that do interest you. And what you can do is you can use a free word cloud generator. There's some examples here of the ones that are the most common. So they're listed on the slide: wordclouds.com, worditout.com, wordout.com. That's a tongue twister to say all three all at once. And you can actually cut and paste those job descriptions into that word cloud generator, and it will identify the words that are used most frequently. And I wanted to say one thing before I forget, because it's not on the slides, about how to, when you save your resume as a PDF, it's a great way to preserve the format, but a PDF isn't always compatible with all ATS. So to play it safe, I would recommend sticking to a Word document in a doc or a docx file versus a PDF. So back to ATS, focusing, as I mentioned, on sprinkling those keywords throughout your resume. Not all ATS can properly read and parse information that's stored in the header or footer sections of your Word document. So be careful that you put your contact information outside of these. I typically will just put Julie Jansen, page 1 or page 2 in the header, and that's it. I don't put any other information. And then when you're using a core competency or areas of expertise section, that'll go right underneath your summary. I mentioned the summary paragraph, and I'm going to show you some examples of all this stuff that I'm talking about in a moment. That lists your strongest hard and soft skills, so that those are up front and center, the most important ones. And usually when I format a resume, it'll be the bulleted keywords section will have 3, 3, 3. So a total of 9 keywords or phrases. in that section. This is a little bit of a grammar thing, but when you're using a lot of words are abbreviated, and the example I've used here is search engine optimization. So SEO is the common acronym for that. You always want to spell out the word or words first, or I should say words because it's an acronym, and then put in parentheses what the acronym is. And then moving forward on your resume, you can just use the acronym. You don't have to continue to spell out the words, which makes life a lot easier. And usually the acronym is the one that's used in job postings, and that's the one that will be scanned. There's definitely a real issue with, there's so many beautiful resume formats online that are available for you to use. And I see all of them, and they're pink and they're purple and they've got polka dots and they've got stripes and they've got images and graphs. And the challenge with those is that ATS can very potentially get confused by all of that visually. So if you are in a design field, or you just are very much wed to having a beautiful looking resume, then I suggest you create a linear version, like the one that I'm describing, and then you can have that pretty resume that you will send to certain people. That's my very strong recommendation, because all of those things can go haywire when they're scanned. And stick to simple bullets. There's also lots of free resume reviews. Just be careful you don't get conned into spending, $1,400 to have your resume rewritten after you get a free resume review. But these are some of the top ones: Top Resume, Job Scan, and Skill Roads. So those are all the sort of nitty-gritty details about your resume. I assume that some of you may have some questions when Scott opens it up for Q&A, but let's now talk briefly about cover letters and email. Yes, 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 you write a cover letter even when you're not asked to. I receive that question so often. People hate writing cover letters. I don't know why they hate writing cover letters, but they do. And so somehow you've got to just come up with a template that you can use, that you can cut and paste. The only piece will be the information that you're going to put in your cover letter that's specifically about the company or organization that you're applying to. So let's just go through this list. If you can open up with something interesting, that's great. The most interesting thing, honestly, is Scott Sinclair referred me to you because you're looking for a banana peeler. And that Scott Sinclair is going to attract that person's attention. But most of us don't have a person who's referring us to a job necessarily. So you're going to have to think about something that's not too crazy, that's about your experience or background, or even better, something notable about the company if you can't think of anything too interesting to say. So, and if you're using an email cover letter, then you definitely want to think long and hard about your email subject line and what that would say. Those are the two parts of a cover letter or email that you want to put the most thought into. And then the rest of your cover letter email is basically using bullets instead of paragraphs. So typically what I do is I write a short paragraph with something interesting, and then I'm applying for the banana peeler job. And then why, my experience is a fit because, and then I have bullet, 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 and I have the 3 because bullets, why my experience is, a fit. And then you keep it brief. So it's just a little intro paragraph, 3 bullets, and a concludes, I'm having trouble talking, which isn't really great, a concluding paragraph. And then please, please, please proof your letter, and of course, proof your resume. And then if you can follow up with a human being, and I know it's hard to do that, try to do that if you're able to find a name. I mean, odds are that you won't always be able to, but it'd be nice if you can. Okay, so I just went backwards. Let me do that again. Okay. So let's talk about LinkedIn. So this is a topic, and we're doing well with time because this is actually a little bit of a briefer webinar, but this is a topic that I can get into every single little detail of how you set up a LinkedIn profile. But you know what? I think that most of you are on LinkedIn now. Maybe you're not using it. There's only a smaller percentage of users on LinkedIn that use it actively. But at least hopefully you have a skeletal profile on LinkedIn, so you know how to set up a LinkedIn profile and put in your information and all of that. So I kind of went through this and said, let me just give you the information that I think is the most important and the most compelling. So what is LinkedIn? It's quite obviously the world's most dominant professional social network. There are, let me see, how many are 1 billion users, just hit 1 billion. Can you imagine? When I've been giving LinkedIn profile webinars for cancer and careers over the years, I remember saying 250 million, and now we're at 1 billion. So it's pretty awesome. That does not mean 1 billion people are on LinkedIn every day, that's for sure. But it is a network of 1 billion people in 200 countries. And it's not just a database. US has the highest number with 200 million users. And essentially what LinkedIn does is it allows you to create a profile that is not a creative writing exercise, because really all LinkedIn is for you to get scanned and for, essentially for people to reach out to you. And then to connect with other people so that you can then connect people to other people. And that's the whole purpose of LinkedIn. The average is 140 job applications are submitted every second on LinkedIn. And LinkedIn is also a wonderful content channel. I don't write original content for LinkedIn, but I will repost what I feel are relevant articles, or for example, I posted that I'm, doing this webinar today, things like that. But then you end up getting impressions and followers and all of the above, if that's important to you. It's not necessarily important to the average job seeker. So don't feel pressure to have to suddenly be this great content creator on LinkedIn. It's not necessary. But it's widely used for sales and marketing for many, many, many companies. More than 96% of companies use social media for recruiting. The number one place they go is, surprise, LinkedIn. So here we are back to keywords. So how do you find a job using LinkedIn? So there's really 3 ways. You can fill out the let recruiters know you're open to opportunities, very brief questionnaire. It is very brief. You click on it right below your picture and it opens up some fields. It asks you to choose 5 job titles. You do not make up job titles. You start typing in PROJ, and whatever falls down, you choose the one that's the most relevant for you. And you do that 5 times. So you're putting in 5 titles in the fields, because if you make up a job title, it's not going to be recognized by the scanning software that recruiters and headhunters use. So you want to be careful about that. It also asks you whether you want to work in a hybrid, remote, or on-site situation, and then it asks you for your geography. So that's really all. In full-time, part-time, and I think freelance. That's all it asks you. But you do need to make sure that that's filled in if you're looking for a job. And I'm sorry, it also asks you whether you're casually looking or you're very assertively looking. Their language, I forget what the exact language is. The second way that you can use it for job search is that you obviously now you're getting jobs emailed to you. So I'm not looking for a job. I've been in my own business for many years, but I filled it in a long time ago, and every once in a while I'll update it just for giggles to see what I get. And I do get a lot of coaching jobs, whether it's, for universities or different kinds of organizations, coaching organizations. And I'm very entertained by reading them. I like reading them. I like knowing what's going on. What are some of these companies looking for? What do they expect? So you can receive email alerts for new jobs that match your general search criteria or that are recommended to you from the jobs you may be interested in feature. And then the final thing, and I'm not so much a big fan of this, but you can do it if you want. There's that open to work photo frame, they call it. I jokingly call it the ring around your neck, but you can use that on your headshot. That was a feature that was added during the pandemic, So when if you want to advertise widely that you're looking for work, then you can certainly use that. But I don't tend to recommend that for whatever reason. So, okay, so now let's look at the different features of your LinkedIn profile, not all of them, but the ones that I think are important. Your headline, we had talked about your headline on your resume, and your headline on LinkedIn, it's an essential element of your LinkedIn profile. People tend to default to using their job title as their headline, which is fine if you have a pretty well-known job title. However, you do have 220 characters that you can use in the headline. So I'm a fan of, if you want to use your job title, fine, and then put some more keywords there that will be scanned. Yes, I rarely see a LinkedIn profile without a headshot anymore. It's very, very rare. You don't need a professional headshot. A current photo is necessary, just like on dating apps. You need to have current photos. And then I do recommend a color photo, but if you want black and white, that's fine as well. Now, this is my I did some things that other people would say are wrong. So for example, usually you want a white background, but I opted to go with this, and this is sort of my banner for my business. And I went with like just sort of the titles that I have, because except for vocational expert, people tend to understand what all these things mean. And it has I'm in Connecticut, so this has my geographic location on it. And that headshot was taken 2 years ago, so. All right. Now let's talk about the about section. The about section is probably one of the few sections on LinkedIn where you can be a little creative if you choose to. So some people choose to use first person tense. Remember, I mentioned that you don't use first person tense or personal pronouns on your resume, but you certainly are more than welcome to do it on LinkedIn. I find most people tend to err on the side of still sounding a little bit more professional and talking about themselves as if it's not them. Julie has X number of years doing this and that and that and this. But you do have 2,600 characters. So it's more than a brief snapshot of who you are. I don't recommend perhaps that you maybe use all those characters, but you could. And I tend to like to use bulleted things. So like in the about section, I have bulleted information in mine about the different kinds of, because I offer so many different types of services. So a little blurb on each service. And for some of you, it might just be a place for you to emphasize your key technical skills in your about section. And I just would write out your about section in a Word document of some kind, and then spell check it, and then cut and paste it in. And please always remember to hit save on LinkedIn. Just keep hitting save as much as you can. Get in that habit. Okay, now what LinkedIn does is they break down the type of information into 3 sections that you need to have on your LinkedIn profile. You don't have to have all of this, but I don't see why you wouldn't just put all of this information on LinkedIn. They call it core, recommended, and additional information. And so I don't need to read it all to you. They added, in addition to your position, and by the way, you can't, you have to put positions in, and you don't need to put months that you worked. Everybody always populates with the months. I just list people's years when I update LinkedIn profiles. They added this career break thing that is great for all of you who have had to take a break from your career because of treatment or just because, you needed to step back. So the career break gives you an opportunity to kind of fill in why you haven't worked rather than feeling self-conscious because you have a gap. The gap question used to be the number one question we would get at Cancer and Careers. And now people just don't ask it quite as frequently because frankly, it doesn't matter as much to employers. And not only that, unfortunately, we're going through a lot of layoffs in the United States. So more and more people between the pandemic and people having illnesses and people taking sabbaticals. There's so many reasons that people have career breaks. And so I think it's a nice term that LinkedIn chose. And then the recommended section, let me feature the recommendations part of it. That's where people, they kind of forget to ask people for that. Like I have a lot of recommendations, but I always have to remember, like just this year, I thought, oh my gosh, I haven't asked anybody for recommendation in so long. I know a couple people at Cancer and Careers have written me recommendations. Thank you. And then I had a couple people write recommendations for me earlier this year, but that's a nice piece that people like to read those. It's one of the few things that they'll read with interest because, and what I do recommend is that you recommend, but that you kind of help the person understand what it is that you'd like them to focus on when they write your recommendation. You have to approve it first before it gets posted. So you don't have to worry about them writing something and putting it up and then you having to say, oh, I didn't like that, And then the additional covers a ton of this other stuff, volunteer experience, professional organizations, any publications, those kinds of things. So like I said earlier, you really kind of want to load it up with as much information as possible. But you're not, like, even in your position section in the core information, you're not putting that much detail about your jobs as you would on a resume. So you really are just going to put a little blurb of what the job was. And then that way, if someone wants to learn more, they will have an opportunity to do so by looking at your resume. So the skills and endorsements section is just that. The endorsements thing is just, I don't even, still to this day, I don't understand why LinkedIn has that as a feature, but people will endorse you and for a skill, and they had a limit of 50, and just recently LinkedIn up the ante to your ability to now add 100 skills, which is awesome because it was so frustrating for me when having to update people's LinkedIn profiles and I would have to count and it would have to be 50 and it would end and I couldn't add any more. So because when you're putting in skills, you want to be able to put skills in different ways. So project management, manage projects, a communicator, strategic communicator. So you're going to use lots of different ways to highlight skills just because every company or organization is different in the way that they use their languaging. And so you just want to make sure it's covered. So when you're typing in a skill, it says add a skill, you start typing it in and it'll give you like a little bulleted section of suggested skills that you can add, and you can pick one of those and put add and save, or you can just add your own skills. But again, similarly to when I was talking about the open to recruiters section, when you're typing in a skill, you don't want to make up a skill. You want to just make sure it's one of the skills that drops down, and you use that because those are going to be the ones that are more commonly scanned. And then your contacts, like I said, they can endorse you for skills. Usually the skills that are your most endorsed for will go first. However, you can reorder your skills in any way you want. And what I usually do is suggest to people that they decide what their top 3 skills should be. Those are the 3 skills that are first visible to someone who's just eyeballing your LinkedIn profile. So for example, one of my skills is executive coaching because that's the lion's share of my own business. And so I want that to be one of the first things that people see that I do, even though I have 80 other skills, Recommendations I mentioned, this is a recommendation I got in in January of this year from a guy named Sean. And I asked him to write a recommendation. He jumped right on it, and it's great. And as I said, they're nice, just to have. So just keep them current if you can. And at a minimum, just have 2 or 3 or 4 if you can. And then your statistics, this is what's called your dashboard. And this can only be seen by you when you sign into your LinkedIn profile. So it shows you how many people have viewed your profile or your posts. You see here, I have 4,100 followers and 165 profile viewers. This was just like last week or a couple weeks ago. 196 people searched for me. And so I have never had a premium LinkedIn profile, never. I am not suggesting that you don't do that or you do that, but I am telling you that I am a LinkedIn expert and I use it every day. And I've never found the need for a premium membership. However, my clients who are in job search do find it beneficial. So that's entirely up to you, but it is not a must. This is the free version that I've had forever. And then finally, a question I commonly get is, well, what do I really actually do when I'm on LinkedIn? I don't know what to do. I mean, they might look at a couple profiles and then they're kind of like at a loss. So remember, your LinkedIn profile is a living document. So you want to be updating it, not every day, not every week, but you want to update it pretty regularly. Get in the habit of doing that. You can decide if you want your connections to see your updates or not. You want to be selective about who you invite to connect and whom you accept invitations from, but you don't want to just connect with people that you know or you've met in person. And then when people do ask you for help, try to respond to them promptly. That's the whole point of it. And then I say spend 15 to 20 minutes a day searching for people to connect with, researching companies, reading content, and just generally, candidly, just getting more comfortable with LinkedIn, because so many people just don't feel comfortable with it. And it's not really a very difficult site to understand or to work with. Okay, so now I'm going to turn it back over to Scott.
Thank you, Julie. That was wonderful. Just before we get into Q&A, and again, if you have any questions, drop them in the Q&A box. Let me just get back here. Okay, great. So these are some job search resources available on our website that we hope you'll check out. Again, a plug for the resume review service, which is free for anybody who has received a cancer diagnosis. You can upload your resume and Julie will get notes back to you on it. And then some upcoming events here. We have our monthly webinars continue next month. Again, we'll be welcoming back Julie. Next month will be networking. And then after that in June, we have balancing work and nutrition. And then in July, we have balancing work and cancer, which is sort of our overview session of everything we do here at Cancer and Careers. So we hope you'll join us for one of those. We also have our national conference coming up on June 21st. That is an all-day event. It's happening on Zoom. And then we have our West Coast conference coming up in October. Those are just named for the time zone that we are holding them in, but anybody can join regardless of where in the country you are. And then finally, this is my email. If you have any questions, feel free to drop me an email after here. We hope you'll also follow us on social media or join our newsletter to keep up to date on everything happening here at Cancer and Careers. And finally, I'll leave up our CE requirements for anybody who needs that information. A link will pop up in your browser at the end of the webinar today with the evaluation, so you can fill it out right away, or we'll send you an email tomorrow by 5 p.m. Eastern time, again, with all the links that you'll need to request those CEs. So, Julie, I have a bunch of questions here. We'll see how many we can get through. Again, if we can't get to your question today, cancerandcareers@cew.org, and we'll get you an answer after today. The first question I have here, Julie, is there are many challenging physical changes following cancer treatment, including hair loss. How would you address this for individuals who are sensitive to such recent change with regard to a headshot or profile picture?
Well, so it's really what your comfort level is. And so I've seen people in that situation use an older headshot. And I've seen people who wear wigs, and I've seen people with headscarves, or hats, so it has everything to do with you and how comfortable you feel. There's certainly no right or wrong.
Yeah, and if you're experiencing skin changes or something like that, put on some
Yeah.
concealer or something
Yeah.
like, or if you don't have concealer, maybe a family member or someone can lend you something too, if that's something you're concerned with. But yeah, I think again, it really comes down to personal preferences there. The next question I have here is, can an older person qualify as entry level? Is that off-putting to a reviewer or recruiter?
So I wouldn't label yourself as entry level per se, unless it's a career change. And then you can kind of position yourself that way. But I don't think, unfortunately, I don't think, and I'm stereotyping, so please forgive me, but I don't think the world at large is very creative about thinking about, someone who's 58 years old who's now entry level. So you're going to either think of a different vernacular or different kinds of language, or, just position yourself as wanting to just step back and have less responsibility and be prepared to talk about it and be prepared to say something in your cover letter.
Yeah, I don't think it should hold you back from applying to like a quote
No.
entry level job, but you don't have to necessarily walk in there and say, "Hi, I'm 55 years old and I'm entry level." Uh, you know. Um, let's see. The next one I have here, I've been told not to list the name of a religious organization in the volunteer or community service portion of my resume. Is it okay to simply state that you volunteer with, quote, a religious organization?
I would list the name of the religious organization. I really would. I don't. If you're, stumping for the Republican Party, then put that on. If you need to put that on your resume, put it on your resume. We all have, different affiliations and different beliefs, and that's what makes the world go round. So I don't think that's very good advice, honestly.
Yeah, I agree. Um, let's see. Many managers and people from our corporate office are on LinkedIn. So how would I go about looking for a new job using LinkedIn without them finding out?
So it's impossible for them to find out unless you use the neck ring, as I call it, that says open to work. That's the only way that someone will be able to tell that you are potentially looking for work. I would say go to your settings in the help section and make sure that it says where it says let your connections know that you have made changes on your profile, unclick that to just ensure, because there's nobody on this earth, myself included, that's looking at like Scott Sinclair's LinkedIn profile and then going back in 3 days and going, oh, look, Scott made a change. He added a comma, it's literally impossible for people to do that. And I know I'm being a little facetious, but the truth is they won't be able to tell.
And I think it's a good practice to people even in a job who aren't looking to keep your LinkedIn updated. So if you put a new, responsibility or achievement on there, that doesn't mean that you're necessarily looking for a new job.
Right, right.
Be a proactive employee and person with a LinkedIn profile. So I wouldn't think too much into it either.
I mean, everybody has one now, the people who don't have them tend to be a lot of people in, like, doctors don't tend to have LinkedIn profiles as much. Or, there's certain, but most teachers, maybe not as much, but most people have some sort of LinkedIn profile.
Yeah. And
So,
unless you're a teacher who's tenured and you're not going anywhere, a doctor who's not going to be looking for necessarily a new job soon.
yeah.
Um, so we are just out of time. I have one more question left. Again, if we didn't get to your question, I'm so sorry. Please shoot us an email, cancerandcareers@cew.org, and we'll get you an answer as soon as we can. So the last question I have here is, all of my volunteer work is breast cancer focused. How do I address that on my resume?
Just put it on your resume. There's absolutely, I mean, we know that we all, I mean, the reason I got involved with Cancer and Careers 18 years ago was because I had a lot of cancer in my family. And it was near and dear to my heart, and I mean, it doesn't matter. I mean, it just matters that, if you're uncomfortable about it and you don't want to tell someone in an interview or job search that you've had breast cancer, that's your choice. Of course, you can just say that it's a cause that's near and dear to your heart, and that's where you volunteer. And we all volunteer for things that are near and dear to our hearts. So
Yeah, I agree. And, we always kind of say to be vague if you don't want to disclose in a job search process. So, I wouldn't necessarily say like I volunteer with Susan G. Komen because I am myself a survivor, and like you don't have to go into that detail. So if you, like Julie just said, just saying it's near and dear to my heart and that's the end of it, I think
yeah,
is a good way to go.
exactly.
Well, thank you, Julie, so much. We'll see you
You're
next month.
welcome.
I'm excited to
Okay,
be back with you.
sounds good.
We hope we'll see some of you then. And again, if we didn't get to your question today, please shoot us an email, cancerandcareers@cew.org, and we'll get you an answer as soon as we can. But thank you all for joining.
Bye, everyone.